What's up, FasCat Nation? How are y'all doing? We have Coach Isaiah Newkirk in the house. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's been a little bit. I've been kind of absent from the podcast for a while, so it's nice to be back.
Well, thank you for joining. And it's right, we've been letting all the other FasCats have a crack at it, but now it's your turn, and we are talking, everyone, about consistency. And you have heard us talk about FTFPing. But Isaiah is going to help us talk about what it really means to be consistent. And you want to give us like a brief overview of that, Isaiah?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've, like especially lately, I've been having so many conversations with athletes about what consistency means and kind of the. I think it's so easy for athletes and even coaches really to get just focused on the key, just like moment in front of them. This like secret sauce, secret workout, like doing everything to a T, and they lose sight of kind of the bigger picture of just day in, day out, the consistency that takes place, and how important that actually is in the long term and in the grand scheme of things. So, yeah, I'm excited to talk about that. I mean, I think this is just all too familiar. It's a conversation, as I said, I've been having a lot lately. So it seems to be the new theme. So
Topic du
yeah,
jour. Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, loyal listeners will recognize our sign off has changed to consistency is the new FTFP. And honestly, that's the inspiration behind this podcast is when we've been, preaching FTFP for years and years and years. And also loyal listeners will know two things about that. It's follow the plan, but it's really developing good training habits, and that's what Isaiah is going to talk with us about today on the podcast. And it's also what I am looking forward to. It's is learning from you is it's not just following the plan. There's more to consistency than that, and so that's listeners what we're going to dive into really quick. Won't uh, beat the dead horse. But last week we let you know we have a 4 month coaching deal. It is good from now through April 30th. You can hire a FasCat coach for $499 and save $300, and that gets you a new custom training plan every month. You get to talk with your coach on the phone every month, and your coach will analyze your data every week, and it'll be awesome. And you'll ride a lot faster. And when you are riding faster, you're having more fun. So go get that if you're interested. And if uh, trying out the FastCat app is more your cup of tea, the first month is now free. So head on over to the website. You can download the FastCat app from the app or the Google Play stores and try the first month free. See what your data says about you. You got nothing to lose, everything to gain. And yeah, ask Coach Cat a question. I think your mind will be blown as we podcasted last week. And if you do the 4 month coaching deal, guess what? You also get Coach Cat included with your coaching. So we're blending the two together. If you listen to last week's episode. So with that out of the way, Isaiah, let's get into consistency. You wanna lead us out with like your overarching coaching philosophy?
yeah. Let's do it. So one of the things that we like you kind of mentioned is consistency. Obviously, it's kind of like a lot of the athletes know, like Frank has said in the past, like turn boxes green. Like it's this constant, like day in day out, like get the work done. But it goes into like setting habits in place and then also actually learning to be flexible with your training in order to um, at the end of the week or at the end of the month or at the end of your season have actually a majority of your training be consistent and how to really make that take place. So we have this segmented out in a couple different ways. And I guess like first we want to get into kind of like what is consistency and yeah, how does that trickle into different parts of your training? So like, you know, as I mentioned earlier, it's more about like how do you nail the overarching training that you have that will set you up for success throughout the entire year. And as you mentioned, it goes beyond just pushing your watts or riding your bike hard. It goes into how you set up your life to be consistent to aid you to be the best you can moving forward. So that's, I have it outlined here as like sleep and recovery. Um, so maybe we start with that because that, of course, you know, trends into everything you do within training. And then, before we even get to what you do on the bike, how do you set yourself up for your best ability on the bike? So, yeah, I mean, like sleeping, I think like, and training, and then just how to aid recovery the most. I think that's been part of the new wave of coaching lately is talking to your athletes about what kind of sleep they're getting, what kind of quality of sleep they're getting.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about wearables is it's kind of brought about this whole new generation of knowledge as far as athletes able to, uh, track how well they're recovering or not beyond just like feeling tired or feeling anxious in the morning. And that takes pre-thought. Like it's easy to go to bed at 11 whenever you get tired. It's easy to wake up and be rushed and then realize you've missed your workout window. Like there's a lot of tips and tricks that I think kind of set you up yourself up well, but ultimately like that's different with everyone's walk of life. And then it's really just having the forethought to think about, oh, this has an impact on me.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
One thing that occurred to me that I think the listeners would enjoy when we talk about consistency, I think, you could be consistent for the week, for the month, maybe for the season, like a quarter, like 3 months. What do you think like really is consistent? Like in with the best athletes that you've seen, whether they're pros or amateurs, like what's a time frame of consistency to like is it years and years and years, or is it like does it need to be in bursts like a 3 months or yeah. What do you can you share that with us?
yeah. I think that's a great question. I mean, the interesting thing lately is, and as I was kind of diving into this topic, was it's really interesting because I'm going into the heart of the season as far as directing Project Echelon, which is a pro team here, and they are at this point, I think, over 40 race days into the season already.
Dang.
So yeah, and
They're
um,
consistently racing.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's only April. But how this relates to consistency is for those guys because they're racing so much. It's almost just the consistency of um, just being able to recover and be able to like hang out at home and be able to sleep in their own bed and what that consistency looks like, and then their consistency of being able to do this day in day out. And I think like to get back to your like micro macro short range, long term kind of focus on consistency. Ultimately, it's kind of the what's really going to aid you is going to be long term. And then as the window gets shorter and shorter, it probably matters a little bit less. Like if you think about it as like, well, if you're only training for one day out of the whole year, probably doesn't matter when you do that day, right? Like
Right.
yeah,
No.
you can just kind of go for it. But the more you have a goal, the longer you've been going at it, the more it compiles, the more it generates strength and fitness, the more it is consistent to kind of hold on to that. Like I think um, the amount of athletes that we've had walk through the door here at FasCat that said I was crushing it. I was in my 20s and my 30s, and I was like I had 5 years of Cat 1 racing, and I was doing great. And then I had kids, and then I stopped training for 5 years, and then I gained a bunch of weight, and then now I'm back to it. It's like they do start from kind of like a level of fitness, and then we kind of have to build back at it. And it is about finding like a new consistency of training. So yeah, I do think the larger the scope, the more that consistency really aids.
Hmm.
But it
Hmm.
is kind of important to focus on the micro side. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you
Yeah.
think?
I've noticed over the years, I think it's like the athletes that are just consistent year in, year out, and like on multiple of 5 years, like 5, 10, 15 years, you can see that the athletes that really accomplish greatness as it relates to them, it's almost like on a 5 year multiple. And And so, listeners, I mean, if you're an amateur bike racer and you're getting into it when you're 38 or 42 or 45, it's like think to 10 years from now and being consistent for a whole 10 years. And you know, it's the Lowe's commercial, you can do it, we can help. But if you're consistent, for the thing about consistency also, the greater the time frame, the less the day to day matters and the more flexibility you can have. And we'll talk about that. But like, if you have an injury or you have, uh, I don't know, you miss a workout, it's like big deal. I'm in year 8 of this. Missing a workout is not the end of the world. But if you're looking at like 8 weeks, it's like, yeah, missing a workout's a big deal if you're gonna, stop. So that's like the big thing I've noticed, just in coaching the athletes that really commit to doing it for the long term, really
I,
improve a lot.
I think that's a great point too, because even if you look at it from the side of, like, let's say one of the athletes that's listening is brand new to training, they're brand new to cycling, and
Hmm.
they have like a consistent couple of months, they're
Yeah.
probably going to like grow exponentially. Like their ability to increase is going to be off the charts. But then somebody that maybe that's been consistent for 5+ years, if they have like a dip in consistency, they're going to be able to like come back to it with that buildup of training
Mm.
in a much different space. So yeah, it is kind of interesting that consistency can be applied to maybe different walks of life or different styles of training, which is kind of I guess why we're talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. So everyone, we're going to talk, let's see, we'll go do sleep and recovery as mentioned. We'll talk about training, like following a plan or following or being consistent over time. And then nutrition. I think this is a huge one, not often talked about, consistency of nutrition. And yeah, do you want to kind of tell us what you mean by that, Isaiah?
Yeah, I mean the this kind of trends into all aspects, which is why this is like such a big topic. I mean, if you like think about it this way, we're talking about consistency of like training and when it goes to every direction. So it could be like, when do you train every day? I think it's fairly important to have a as consistent of a training schedule as you possibly can. And we're also going to talk about flexibility, and of course we'll get to that. But if you have the perfect world, you would work out at the same time every single day. Most pro bike racers do this, and it's like the glory of their life. And they can work out at 10 a.m. every day when it's perfect, and it's
Universal
like the
life
perfect time to eat
cycle.
breakfast. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. We'll sleep in until 9, have breakfast, go ride at 10. Yeah. For the rest of us, it's more about finding like a consistent time where we can train, where we can then allow our body a maximum period of recovery around it. And then we're
Mhm.
also kind of learning and arcing our body within kind of like our circadian rhythm of being able to work out. And then getting to nutrition, it also allows us to fine tune our nutrition as to
Mhm.
maximizing that training. So, like for example, if an athlete works out at 6 a.m. every morning and they dial in their fueling to be able to do that maybe hour session at 6 a.m., there's a certain way of fueling for that. That's going to be very different than if you work out at 6 p.m.
Mhm.
And being able to optimize fueling for that. So, learning to be consistent amongst both or all things is definitely going to help big time.
Mhm.
But I think like being able to then learn how your body responds in different moments like that is going to lead to the most success for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't know about you, but for 10 years in a row, starting in 7th grade, I did after school sports. And
Yeah.
so we were on the tennis court at 3:30 p.m. for 6 years, and then in college it was like 5 p.m. or 4:30 or 4. But anyway, like nowadays as I'm older, uh, I mess myself up when I like ride in the morning. I'm like off my routine, but if I can ride at like 3:30 in the afternoon, that's my jam. I know how to eat for
Yeah.
it, and then I don't know, it just feels like I feel like working out. But yeah, so
Yeah.
if I in my utopian ideal world, it's 4:47, I'd just be finishing up a ride right now. Yeah, I don't
Yep.
know. Are you the
Cer-
same way? Do you what's like, I mean, are you the universal 10 a.m. former pro athlete
Oh,
guy?
I mean, I love that when I trained. Like
Mhm.
that was my jam. But I also thought it was incredibly boring because you waste so much of that time. But oddly, I've been always really good at working out in the evening.
Hmm.
That's like I think from racing on the track, there was always like late night racing, and I
Uh,
always thrived at having those sessions. And then I played soccer growing up too, and that was when most of the games were.
mhm.
Um, so I've always been really good at that. So I'm pretty tuned to being able to kind of like offset when I eat and how I eat dinner, and then being able to work out after dinner. Do I ever
Mhm.
recommend an athlete do that? No, that's not at all what I recommend because it's really hard to do. But it speaks to like some people, like some of my athletes, really struggle working out at like 3:30, kind of when your optimal window is, because they struggle with being able to like snack
Yeah.
after lunch in order to be able to do well with the workout. But yeah, I mean, it speaks to like it just takes time dialing it in for what works with you, and then
Mhm.
mimicking that over and over again so you can um, make the best of it. But I don't know, there's, I guess, like, have you found moments when you don't work out at 3:30, or let's say you have to work out at like you and I have done group rides together at like
Mhm.
7 a.m.
Yeah,
I of
yeah.
course struggle big time fueling for those, so like yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah, the first couple of 6:30 a.m.s on Wednesday in the summer are rude awakening, but you do like 3 or 4 of them and you get into your rhythm. But honestly, the next day I'm like, I'm back to 3:30.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it's also interesting. I I I'm weird. Like 10 a.m. on Saturday, that's the time to ride, not 3:30. It's a difference between the weekend and the weekday. And if I try to ride at 3:30 on Saturday afternoon, I'm garbage. But
yeah.
but yeah, total working person's dilemma. I would say listeners, it's like, you know, try to find your habits that's in tune with your routine and your lifestyle and what you're used to, and that will really help. I mean, in the 7 habits of successful masters cyclists, we really preach like successful masters work out in the morning. I think I would like add a caveat of like find the time of day that works the best for you in your life and your nutrition and work and family, and just try to be consistent at it. Yeah.
I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, but like going into being flexible, this is
Yeah.
also a good time to bring that into the fold of like, all right, we're talking about let's say our days are exactly the same every day, and I think a majority of us that's not the case. And then you've got Frank that like loves to work it out at 3:30 p.m., but then on a Saturday is gonna hustle to get out at 10 and get the full day in, and that's a majority of us, I think. So um, although that might be the more extreme side where it'll be from like 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. or whatever window. But either way, it's important for us to then like kind of be adaptable within the consistency of like, all right, I know my body, and this takes some experimenting for sure, where it's like, okay, well, I know tomorrow I get the liberty of sleeping in and then going out on this perfect 10 a.m. ride. But then,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you're going to have to change how you fuel, and you're going to have to change how you eat. So maybe don't have breakfast at 5 a.m., or stagger how you're having your
Yeah.
breakfast, or make sure you're eating within it like a couple hours you ride and all that good stuff that like but yeah, that's a great example. Like, don't we're not going to have this picture perfect world where everything is the same every day, and that can be good sometimes. So it's like, but it's also then important to have the consistency of preparing for that change.
Yeah. Like what happens if you're know ahead of time you're not going to be able to work out or ride at your preferred time? How do you adapt and plan ahead for that? And that's also a consistency, that's developing good habits. Like an example that comes to mind is, you like to ride 10 a.m. on Saturday, but what happens when you want to see your kid's soccer game that's also at 10 a.m.? What do you do? And it's like, I've fielded this question before. Like in the summertime when it's like really, really hot, but you have like a 4 hour ride, do you do it at 5:30 and get done at 9:30? Or do you do it at 11:30 in the heat of the day, but then you don't have to rush to get done because you don't have a deadline. And it's like this. It's almost like
Yeah.
you're probably going to have that happen more than once, so you might experiment and see which one works best. But
Yeah.
if an athlete asked me that question, I would say 5:30. Yeah, it's in the summer. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if
Yeah.
it's super hot. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, there's always like case by cases, and um, I think I've had moments where I've told athletes to do one or the other.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, normally I would say you're spot on, and that's the right way to go.
mhm,
But I think another interesting side, not to skip with nutrition, is consistency of fueling during the ride,
mhm,
and dialing that in, because I think that's something that often gets lost. Is, you've got people that, athletes that will fuel really well maybe during a race, or maybe they'll train or they'll fuel really well during their long rides, but then they won't fuel as well during the week. So then they lose sight of kind of that the changes that makes long term within their consistency to be able to recover and then hit their training day to day to day. So
mm,
again, it's just all about being, I guess, like kind of a student to the sport, and making sure you kind of have your ducks in the row, and then you have things checked off for each day, and that you're kind of having some forethought. And I get like athletes all the time that mention like, oh, I bet like coaching your pros are the most fun, or the most like detail oriented coaching that you do. But funny enough, it's oftentimes sometimes the opposite, because they're kind of nonchalant. They have ability to just fuel whenever they want, or stop at a gas station if they want and eat something, or like eat 5 times a day, compared to a lot of my I guess average individuals or average athletes that have to be really tuned. They have to be really dialed. And
mhm,
not to mention the fact that usually the pros are a little bit more less mature on how they do that. So the masters racers or average individuals tend to be pretty dialed actually once they get their routine set. And then
mm,
sometimes, believe it or not, um, I would make the argument that like the average athlete, or the average like masters athlete that has a family, has a job, and all that, they are more consistent with their training than the pros are,
yeah.
um,
Funny
because
how
they
that.
have their things put together. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think also it's like they have to. It's like if that's like how they dial it in, that's the one thing they have the ability to control to ensure their success. And if they don't, it's like, it goes off the rails really quick. One thing that, I notice with the athletes that maybe work out at work, you have to be you have to be so consistent with bringing your food with you to work. And then you have to be consistent in your grocery shopping, you have to be consistent in your packing, preparing of your food so that you can eat it at the right things. And an opposite habit is the athletes that work out at work, but then they get back and they have nothing to eat, and then they lose in the break room, or then they have to like leave work to go find a sandwich or a burrito, and yeah,
yeah,
it's not optimal. Yeah, or they get
yeah,
home and they're ravenous, and anyway, yeah, yeah. Um, what about consistency with sleep and recovery? Let's circle back circle back to that a teeny bit. Like in your mind,
yeah.
like what are you? What's like good? Like what's a good example of being consistent with your recovery, like sleep and other uh, modalities?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is just going to be create a routine to be consistent on sleep, and
Mm,
try and get your environment consistent. So that could be temperature, that could be noise, that could
mhm,
be like, for example, at least here in Colorado, our as the spring comes and then the summer comes, the nights are really great. You can have the windows open and it can cool down the house, and it feels really nice. But what I notice is I tend to go to bed super hot, have the windows open, and then in like 2 in the morning, I wake up and I have to shut the windows because I'm cold.
Yeah.
That's not good practices. That's an example of really bad consistency. And I am consistent at being bad at it, but that doesn't make it a good habit. So it's, I think those are one of those things that, like, find what works, fight the urge to do something it doesn't, and then really tune that in.
Mhm.
I may be surprised the differences that makes. I mean, there's so many different avenues that you can go down towards like being consistent with your recovery, but I think like golden rule above everything is just going to be find what leaves you in a good place, whether or not that's like stretching before bed or reading or whatever it might be. But that um, it's working for a reason. So I would say stay consistent on what works.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things I tell athletes is to try to go to bed the same time every night. And it, you can divide that up in two between work nights and weekends, but generally, you know, Sunday through Thursday, pick a bedtime, try to be consistent with it. The same thing for waking up. Sleep consistency also consists of sleeping to the same time each day. It can be varied on Friday and Saturdays if that's your weekend, for example. Like you might go to bed a little bit later because you can sleep a little bit later. But I think as you get older, it doesn't even matter. You're just the same time, same morning, everything. But yeah, yeah. I think also sleep consistency is like what you mentioned, the routines you do beforehand and like how you wind down. I, I don't watch TV at all, but I like turning on the TV maybe like 45 minutes before bed and totally vegging out, like laying horizontal, like on the couch and just no phone, no screens except for the TV. And just, I don't know, that works for me. And the other thing is, you mentioned temperature. That's huge for me. I try to go to bed cold. Um, like 65 degrees. Even in the winter, I love it cold. My wife hates me because like she wants to go to bed at like 72 degrees. So we fight over the thermostat easily all the time. I don't know if that's the way it is in your house. Do you have any athletes on the Sleep 8 mattress?
I have a few. I've definitely recommended that to quite a few athletes too, just because it does allow like really good control.
Mm.
And and then the athletes that I've had use it love it and really won't go back. Um, yeah, it's tough because like my wife's the same. She doesn't. She would prefer it be 70 degrees as well,
Yep.
which is not going to fly with me. And then, yeah, I mean, even the discrepancy between maybe your spouse going to bed at a different time and
Oh
trying
yeah.
to align on that. And I
Yeah.
think like some, relationships are different and personalities are different and people handle this in different ways. But like, I think it's fair along using consistency as our theme here and setting that routine is kind of like, all right, maybe they give 30 minutes, you give 30 minutes. And then that's kind of how you meet in the middle. And that way you can create a consistent schedule. And that might mean waking up at a slightly different time. But, I think that goes a long way. And I guess we're going back to like being a little bit flexible. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's what I found works too.
Yeah, you mentioned I think we have happy bike, happy life in our podcast outline, but that's the happy spouse, happy house mantra
Yep.
for sure.
Yep.
I like my wife is sometimes a night owl, and the good thing is I know when she's gonna like pull an all nighter or work, and I have like this routine. I guess I got like two pillows and I put them over my head and she's got the light. Like I'm a big light guy. I have to have it pitch black. Like, and when she's working, she's got her light on. And it's amazing how annoying it is. And you just have to figure out a way to, yeah, like I know life is hard, like to push through it. But yeah, she'll say the same thing about me going to bed early. So
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So what about like post workout consistency, what you do for recovery? Let's not forget that. Like, and also maybe massage and uh, other things you do for yourself to facilitate recovery?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is coming down to how many variables can you cover? Like how detail oriented can you be to cover how you will feel and how your training will progress. So within line with that is fueling post ride. So kind of like again being dialed about kind of all right, where are you getting your food? Do you have food?
Mm,
Do you have quick recovery style based food, whether or not that's like a protein shake, or do you have you know um, rice bowl you can get in your face, like all of that different things. Not just getting into the kitchen and staring at your pantry. That's step one, and then
yeah.
yeah, I think like the um, it can feel, I guess, like intimidating or annoying to set up a routine that's so dialed like this, or to feel like your life is robotic and you can't be spontaneous. But at the same time, it's not like you can make it fairly simple, and it's not something that you have to go above and beyond and make a meal for every single day of the week. It's just having those crutches that you go to after working out or after key workouts that like really cater that recovery forward, so you can have that just check done. Okay, good, moving on. Um, and I found that like works big time.
Hmm. Yeah, I find for the working athletes, if you can just be consistent with your post workout meal during the week, like that's like the hierarchy of your priority, because so many times during the week it's like work or meetings or errands or this and that, but that it's the meal that can help the most. But then what you can do on the weekend, if you have this going on, then you can like sometimes I have athletes, I'm like, be a pro for a day on Saturday, and it's like right at 10 a.m., have that post workout lunch, you know, hit the couch, do the nap, lay around, live that's the pro life. And we have fun with it. It's like, how was your pro day? And they're like, yeah, my
That's great.
family got mad at me or something. But you can't do it all the time. But yeah, I think how you recover and are consistent with your recovery on the weekend is different than the week. But on the weekend, it's like naps, massages, if possible. You can even do space legs, just like laying around. And then the week is when it's busier. It's like just food and hydration for the most part.
Yeah, and then going like again, kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but speaking to being a little bit flexible.
Mm,
So let's say for like I've got athletes that are like, all right, I've got an hour and a half that I have to devote to working out, and that includes like kitting up, kitting down, and getting in something for recovery. It's like, all right, cool. You can segment out the minutes here, but to a degree, you're going to have to probably sacrifice something. So, what are you going to do that for, and kind of what is that? And I think the flexibility comes into play. Like, all right, are you finding that you're not recovering as fast? Are you finding that your quads are tight? Are you finding that you have a knot somewhere in your calves that always formulate after like a hard couple of workouts? Do you find that you need a little bit more time more towards stretching or foam rolling? And that's kind of when you might want to trim like a little bit of time on your workouts to help you have a little bit more time to hit those extra things that will kind of escalate your workout routine in the future or your recovery. And that could be something just like your cool down is cut by a couple of minutes. And I think that goes back to like, all right, most of our workouts are going to be set at a half hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, so on and so on formulation. But like, why do we do that? Probably because it's a nice round number, but it's okay to step away from that sometime if you're aiding your recovery in ways that probably are going to benefit you more than doing 5 minutes of zone one at the end of your workout. So I think that's when kind of coming in to be flexible with what you need specifically to help with that consistency long term is going to make a big difference.
yeah, and that's kind of a good lead in to when to be flexible and when to like. Can you tell us what you mean by that? Like when to when to give yourself a break sometimes, or Like this is the thing that came up with the FTFPing is like when you should follow the plan and when you shouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, and I started thinking about this in kind of like a regards to like, all right, what are the rules that we can put into place to like help with this? Um, but I think like the big thing is to step back. I think that's usually what the coach provides. Because again, athletes tend to be so focused on what's in front of them or what the next workout is or even what the next race is, that they forget the big picture of like, all right, we tend to be working in a full season ratio, a couple months, a couple weeks. Like there's a big picture that has to be at play. And then if you are really struggling to get in a session or life is really crazy right now, it can be worthwhile to step back, look at what the big picture and what your goals are to reassess like, all right, am I really sacrificing a lot with maybe giving up 30 minutes of zone 2 of this ride? Or am I really sacrificing a lot if I move this day over and move it to a different day?
Mm.
Um, Ultimately, best case scenario, like you buckle down, you can fit it in, everyone's happy. Um, you still get to go to your kid's baseball game, like all that good stuff. But there are going to be moments where life just gets too crazy. What I find most often is that athletes, before stepping back and kind of analyzing how can I adapt this and to really still get the most benefit I possibly can, they will bag it instead. They would
Mm.
rather it be red than not be green, to use
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the color analogy.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And that
yeah.
doesn't,
Well, you can also uh, you can hack hack the red green if you move the red to another day and put a recovery day on. If you're that
yep,
OCD,
yep,
yeah.
yep,
I think
yeah,
also what you mentioned, the athletes that know to bag it, that works when you're in it for the long haul. The Because then now you're talking about the sustainability of your commitment to consistency, and it really helps. And I think also listeners, there's probably like a wide variety of how people train out there in podcast land, and I think the two types of cohorts that do it really well are those that have a coach and the coach can say, dude, man, bag it. This is not a big deal in the consistency scheme of things. And then there's the self-coached athlete that's understands, has enough experience to understand that bagging it on one day, is just a blip in time on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 year scheme of things. And it leads to happiness and that sustainability and less burnout. And yeah, I think we all know the athletes that are too rigid. They've I mean, and it can that are just rigid for like 3 years, and then one day they wake up and they're like, "I'm out."
it's funny. I think that like looking back on it, the amount of athletes that I mean, like 10 plus years of coaching, like we've all had countless athletes reach out to us being like, I don't think I can do this workout today. My kid's sick. I have to work a night shift or something like, the list is endless, but the amount of times I've just been that type of a coach that I'm just like, nope, don't care, like deal with it, figure out your life, do the workout. Like I would rather you be a bad
Uh-huh.
dad than not do your workout. Is obviously that list is very very small, and if ever. So um, I think
Yeah.
again it's like all about taking the step back and like being like, is this really going to murder my training, or is this something that I can be calculated and remove the emotional side and apply it in a good way to allow consistency long term in my training. And usually, it's a pretty easy adaptation that takes a couple of minutes of thought. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I'm there may have been one time in 20 years where I've held an athlete to the workout on account of like, what you just mentioned. And I think the instance was like I just detected a bad habit developing, and I wanted to use that moment to try to break the habit forming. Like, hey, this is the third time this has happened, so let's just confront it right now. And yep, that's what coaches do, y'all. 99.98 times we're gonna say bag it, and then there's a 0.01% where we're gonna hold you to it because we don't want you to form a bad habit.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point though. Like there has been times 100% where I've detected like we all have it, a mental weakness,
Hmm.
maybe a particular individual did not want to do a particular type of interval.
Mm.
Um, and I kind of like detected those things coming to light. But that kind of goes back to the beginning of like set a routine that allows you to set yourself up for success the best you can. And then, um, like, one of my points that I wanted to cover was like, look ahead, look what's coming, set yourself up for success. Like, know that you have a hard workout coming. Hey, it's probably a good idea to not like have 12 obligations in and around those VO2 efforts that you need to do that might be a little bit over the top. And that I think forward thinking goes a long way with then knowing what variables are at play as to why you might need to bag a workout. Because I think oftentimes athletes are like, oh man, maybe I'm just weak, maybe that's why I want to bag this workout, maybe that's why I can't do it. And it's like, well, no, it's probably because like your kid's crying in the other room, and you probably need to focus on that. But like I know
Mm.
I'm spitting out like extremes, but it does, like we've all kind of had these moments. And even if it's something like earlier we were talking about nutrition, let's say your work meetings got pushed back, so you didn't get on the bike until 5:36. You're super hungry, you haven't had dinner. What are you going to do? Maybe let's say you have a snack and you get out on your ride and then you bonk because your body's like, hey, I'd like you to go have dinner instead of doing these VO2s. Then what do you do? And how do you respond to that? Do you bag it? Do you force yourself to go through VO2s while you're bonking, which we both know is impossible? So it's one of those moments that, again, like step back, remove the emotion, and then kind of make like a calculated approach towards long term how to
Yeah.
best yourself and your training. Yeah.
What do you do if you have VO2s and you've run out of food? Yeah, what do you recommend?
Well, I mean, for the most part, if you are out on the road and you're trying to do 4x5s, let's call it that. Let's just give it the
Yeah.
worst possible opportunity here. Um, and I mean, first thing that I would normally recommend is slam whatever food you have. Like, get something in your system, see if you can save it. It's an amazing, like, the body's an amazing thing. It'll metabolize things so fast when you are like truly on its limit. And
Hmm.
then see what your body does. Like, see if you can turn it around. I think like when I was training full time, like I had one day where I bonked and I had a bunch of sets I had to go do, and I stopped at a gas station, like slammed a bunch of food, gave myself
Hmm.
some time, and then went out and did it. And my body just happened to reacted, but like that was a total gamble. Um,
Hmm.
but ultimately, I think it's important to like make the call. So what probably 90% of the time you'll slam your food and you're still bonking, so your body's still in a deficit, and it's not going to be constructive to go train anymore. That's going to be mute. It's actually probably just going to dig your hole deeper, and it would be better for you to not dig that hole and be able to then save energy for future days where you can make up for the mistake that you just made.
Yes.
So that might be trading it for another day. It might be looking forward and applying the intervals during a zone 2 day later. Like it, I think that's where athletes go wrong is they forget like, hey, I can do damage control in a greater way rather than just like, all right, how do I feel like I did 30 seconds of this 5 minute effort, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, like you can be flexible with your training plan from what's based on what's happening. It's not like we recommend bunking before your VO2s, but it's
no.
going to happen if you're consistent over time. And then how do you adapt, downstream? And that's that's flexibility to give you consistency and sustainability. One thing that occurred to me, like the athletes that I work with multiple years, year after year after year, we they always want to know when's the hypertrophy phase, and then when are they going to switch from base to race? Because, and I'm like, yeah, so I'll get that question in the summer. When are we going to be lifting weights? And they want to know, yeah, when they should plan on, yeah, uh, being really sore for 2 weeks, or it's a. And what reminded me of that is like we send out an email to everyone yesterday about now's the time to switch from base to race, start doing your intervals, tuck away your base, start riding hard, doing efforts if you haven't already. And a lot of athletes, they like to know when that's coming. That's like, for this the I'm so seasonal now. It's like when I get to Labor Day, I feel like just taking a break because that's what we did for the longest time. But when you get to like March, it's like I feel like doing intervals all of a sudden. And when you get, December through February, it's like I feel like riding slow and doing endurance miles. So, um, but yeah, I think athletes, the listeners out there, the ones that n- plan ahead, know that the hard work is coming. We were talking about this in the coaches meeting the other day. Like, print out your training plan, look at it in advance. Don't just turn on your bike computer and see what workout is on your device per day. Because one of these days where you're going to have a Tabata workout and you're not going to be prepared. Yeah.
Yeah, like be ultimately like be invested in your training. Like own it. I think that's a huge part of being a successful athlete is like if you want to be able to make a roadside decision on whether or not you should realistically like call a workout or if you should change your schedule or something like that in order to achieve consistency or even just to be the best athlete you can be, like own your training and own yourself as an athlete, and then you can look ahead to those tabatos. You can look ahead like, oh wait, I need to be doing this crazy long ride on a Sunday, and oh snap, that's like my wife's birthday, and I need to plan and change things up to help with that. And then you can stay consistent instead of, um, you know, even shout out to my athletes over the years that have sent me an email on a Friday being like, oh snap, it's like my son's birthday on Saturday. I can't ride, and I have to like. At that point, you it's everything within the coach's will to not be like, well, it's a little late there, bud, but then you do what you can as a coach to like help them
Mhm.
proceed with their training. But that's a great point. Like look ahead, own your training,
Mhm.
and that pays dividends in kind of the long term scope and short term scope. Big time. It's huge. It's massive.
Yeah. Yeah. All the athletes out there, be a professional planner. I had this athlete one time. He was a planner at work, and he kept reminding me. He's like, "Remember, I'm a planner, and so we're going to plan this out well in advance." I'm like, "Okay, great." And we had all the vacations, all the family birthdays, kids' birthdays, all that planned out a year in advance. It was great. But then I think to your point, some athletes, I don't know, the older I get, the more day to day I get, the less planning I do. But so it's like, oh boy, kid's birthday is tomorrow. Oops, forgot to let coach know. But really own the training, and you know, like when you have your, like whether it's your every 2 week call or every 4 week call or wherever you have a coaching consultation, the most successful athletes I've noticed, they look ahead and they pre-plan, like got a group ride here or board meeting here, birthday here, soccer game here, or I love this. The family's out of town. Load me up with, I can ride all day. That's a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is a good one. Yeah, and I know like we're driving home this concept of like be organized, like have everything dialed, like have a daily planner, know every second of every day. And I know that could be really intimidating for some athletes. But I guess if you struggle with doing that in your life, and maybe you are like the spur of the moment type person, and being this detail oriented would be really hard for you, then I would say like invest in your training in a different way by knowing what the purpose and methodology and approach is to your training, so that like when you are stuck in this moment of like being stuck on the road bonking, you know what that overarching purpose is to your training, and you can make a calculated call, versus just like flowing by the seat of your pants. And believe me when I say, like, I, for whatever reason, um, bike racer, pro, usually younger male, um, they are well known for not having their schedule dialed and flowing by the seat of their pants. Actually, one of our very good riders on Project Echelon is known for that.
Mm.
And guess what? His training gets interrupted quite often. But it's one of those things that, like, you know, a, don't be like that, but then also, know the overarching purpose and help kind of guide yourself, and then maybe pick one or two things to be like super dialed on, because I think most people, most grown-ups, can really be tuned on certain things that kind of help move their life along. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some things you're going to have to let go. It's like we just cannot deal with this today. and
Yeah.
and and it's okay. Yeah, like I think this goes back to have the food, that's your top priority after a workout, and then you can do the recovery. You can't do all the other recovery activities because you're so busy. But yeah, consistency with I guess the ability to let things go and be consistently flexible to a point.
And it also seems like an overarching theme is be consistent long term. Like,
Yes.
viewing things long term or being consistent in the long run will help you be more flexible today, basically, is the answer.
Hmm.
Like, don't have a string of 3 weeks where you've just been not fine-tuned and not consistent. But be flexible on a day here, a day there. Like, that stuff is kind of how you do this for a lifetime versus just doing it um, for a year.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
even say. I was going to say for 6 weeks because
Yeah.
yeah, we were big on 6 week plans for a long time, and we were that was when you get serious and you follow the plan for those 6 weeks. But for the other 46 weeks of the year, you still want to be consistent. Uh, you don't want to you know I don't know, like you not be consistent with your riding and training and nutrition. We get this a lot with nutrition seems to be the biggest offender of consistency I notice with athletes. I don't know if it is for you, but it's like we eat really well for a third of the year, kind of mediocre for another third, and maybe like a whole half of the year it's like Doritos and soda or something. But yeah, I think cyclists in general were really bad about being consistently good on their nutrition over the long term.
I think just athletes in general, I've noticed, are good at being all in on something.
Yeah, yeah,
So to maintain that year round or long term is really difficult. Um, and I think it's like the athletes that I find that find a good middle ground or find like the balance that they need to achieve consistency long term. Those are the ones who make it the farthest or succeed the most or achieve their goals year after year after year. Um,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, but it's hard.
It is. You said the magic word there, I think, is balance. Finding that balance between super rigid and then too loose. And if you find that balance, that's the consistency. Yeah, for sure. The thing that also came to mind, I know we're not anywhere near the postseason break, but I always find that athletes that take a good postseason break and recharge and come back to the training in the appropriate amount of time, not 2 months or 3 months. That's inconsistent. But that take the right amount of that postseason break, which is the opposite of what we're talking about, but it is totally consistent within the annual periodization.
Totally. Yeah, Totally, totally.
Yeah. So let's see, what other areas of consistency have we missed so far? Did we hit them all?
Man, we've hit a good amount of them. I think the other big thing I wanted to drive home,
Mhm.
which I think will really help in long term for a good majority of athletes, is like, let's say for example, I have an athlete that reaches out to me and says like, oh, I felt horrible on this workout. This workout was awful. Didn't do well. Total failure. That kind of moment where you're like walking an athlete, um, keeping an athlete from walking off a bridge, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But what I often do is kind of extrapolate variables and pull out like what's at play, what's happening here. Why is your heart rate high? Why did you have bad sleep? Did you fuel well on this? That's one of my biggest questions that I think my athletes get really annoyed with is like, what'd you eat during this ride? Like literally,
Yeah,
what like list it out, please.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I'm sure they yeah. But getting full circle back to kind of why I'm even talking about this is like to be consistent is to have less variables at play.
Hmm.
So even if you have like one day where you're flexible and you don't do a workout and you move it around, that's just one variable. That's it. You're keeping the train from snowballing to where you have six different variables at play. You are focused and planning ahead so where you can be consistent so then the variables are less because you have your food dialed, you know how your sleep is going to be, you know what kind of training you can do while your family's in town, so you have this consistency safety net at play. And I think that's the biggest thing is like athletes get so frazzled as we all do when our sensations are bad. But guess what? When your sensations are bad, you need to know what variables are at work. And the more consistent your training is, the less variables will be at work, and the more often you will feel good. It kind of goes just hand in hand, and it's that simple in a
Yeah,
in a simplified way. Yeah,
I love that. Yeah. The less variables, the more control and the more you know what's going on. Because if you're, yeah, there's so many variables that's to to dial in. So if listeners, if you can take home the big point of the podcast, it's not just consistency and following the plan, it's all the things. And we're not trying to like try to overwhelm you, but we hit all the core things of training and recovery and nutrition. I'd add hydration in there too. Oh,
totally.
you know what we forgot to mention is bike maintenance. Yes.
Yeah,
I think you put that in there. Yeah.
I did.
How
Yeah,
often should you wax and lube your chain and clean, degrease, and all the things?
yeah. No, so I'll throw one of my athletes under the bus who has this like uncanny ability to anytime a bike race is coming, he will without fail either have a family outing come up or have his bike fall apart. It will be like uncanny that it hits to the point where it's an ongoing joke now. Where this
Right.
past time there's a crit on his calendar and he messaged me with both. He was like, "Ah, oh, my kid is sick and I snapped my chain." And I was like, oh, okay, all right, here we go.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that like, and don't worry, I've had this conversation with him, but like the idea is that you need to be thinking ahead. Same, we're going around the bush here, but like think ahead and you should both plan in like, all right, my bike needs to be dialed and working within like easily a couple weeks of your something that matters to you. And
Hmm.
I would go even further to say your bike needs to be dialed a couple weeks ahead of key training periods, ahead of
Yeah,
times
totally.
that matter to you. So I think people
Yeah.
get fixated on a race and forget, oh wait, I need to get my bike worked on. And then they go to a bike shop and they hand in their bike and they're like, great, can you have this ready for me tomorrow? And the bike shops are going to be like, no, I'll have this ready for you in 2 weeks if you're lucky. And
Right.
so plan that ahead and think about it. I mean, if you're able to do your own bike maintenance, awesome. If you're like, I remember when I was racing, I would be like up till midnight working on my TT bike ahead of the travel day before like Gila or something because I was procrastinated and was a fool and waited. So like, yeah, don't do that. Have yourself dialed. Make sure to kind of like, I think some of my good athletes like that are maybe a little bit more tuned and scripted have like this day. Like I think I have one athlete, Brian, who has notes in his training peaks about when he needs to replace a chain or when
Yep.
he lasted his brake pads or when he needs to rebleed his bikes. Like that's how dialed he is on it.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you need to go that dialed. Like actually, another athlete I had, another Brian, would leave in how long his current lube was on his chain
Oh
before he
boy.
replaced it.
Yeah.
That's a little much, but like you're
Yeah.
getting, yeah, like any of that stuff that kind of helps you be aware of what you need to do and when, sure, like go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the dialed athlete, a broken chain. One of, you remember Pete Weber, BJC?
Totally. Yeah.
I love this expression. He said, you got to be a Boy Scout with your training. You and you alone are responsible for your training. And if you snap your chain, what do? You need to have a spare chain in your garage and ready to put on a new one. That's be the Boy Scout and like, or or take your bike to the mechanic regularly. I like to have athletes, especially cyclocross athletes. I'm like, you wash your bike after every race. Don't wait until 3 days in the middle of the week. And then also have athletes tune up their bike like on the day off before the openers. That's a big routine consistent thing. But yeah, like your Brian's noted, uh, when to charge up your electric shifting batteries and your power meter batteries, and replace the stands in your tires and replace the tires, and yeah, all the things. So yeah, I think like the overall theme I've noticed from the podcast is just there's more to consistency in being a good athlete than just following the plan. It's good habits in all aspects of training that we've mentioned, and just trying to be consistent with those as best as you can.
Love it. Nailed it. Yeah. I feel like it's half the time with coaching we are kind of like life coaches to a degree. Um
Yeah,
and I think that does and there's a reason for that. And this is one of the reasons, one of the big reasons for sure.
yeah, yeah. We're naggers. Have you done
We
this?
are
Have you?
knack.
did you did you load up on your carbohydrate? Did you pump your chain or pump your tires up? But yeah, it's the fundamentals, y'all. And yeah, just try to be consistent, and just try to think of your training as a long-term project for sure. Uh, well, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Do you have any final parting words of wisdom to share? This was inspired by Isaiah, so I should give you the last word.
No, I mean I think the I love dialing in this stuff with my athletes because I think that is really the power of being on a training plan is kind of that long term progression, whether or not that's 6 weeks, whether or not that's 6 years. But then I think like having the ability to step back, and that's like why I've always struggled being my own coach and being a self coach is like it's so difficult to remove that emotional piece and really view it from an analytical lens, long term lens. Give yourself a little bit of grace, be a little bit flexible, and then also then fine tune your life to be able to be the best athlete you can be. It's a big task. So yeah, using these tricks to kind of like check yourself, take a moment, and then proceed to keep your training the best it can be, I think is just this massive edge forward that not all athletes achieve. And um, I think is like a continuation goal for every coach and athlete out there.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen the thing. it's like, showing up on time and trying hard doesn't take any talent. And I think like consistency, it doesn't matter where you are on the, scale of cycling. You can be a good, you can be really good at consistency no matter how much time you have to train. And that makes a big difference. If you can only train 5 or 6 hours a week, being consistent for 5 or 6 hours a week for years and years and years is going to net you a big gain versus 5 to 6 hours inconsistent. Yeah.
100%
Sweet.
agree.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for the podcast, Isaiah, and good luck
Of
to all
course.
your athletes that are coming up racing soon. And yeah, we'll have to have you back on the podcast when we rotate through all the other fast cats coming up here
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
shortly.
Be fun. That'd be fun. Yeah. But thanks for this. This is great.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, everyone, you know what to do. Work hard, ride fast, have fun, and as always, try to be consistent. It's the new FTFP. Thanks, everyone. See ya.